Welcome, everybody. Joe Tarnowski with ECRM, and I wanted to thank you for joining us for the European Purpose-Driven and Indie Brands Program for Beauty and Personal Care. We have a great presentation for you today. Joe Griffiths, the Global Beauty and Personal Care Team Lead at NielsenIQ, is going to talk about how to unlock growth with brand purpose. So we're going to do this fireside chat style. Joe put together some slides featuring some recent research that he'll be presenting, and I'll be adding some commentary here and there. So with that, Joe, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to hand it off to you to kick things off.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, very excited to talk to everyone today. So thanks a lot. Let's kick it off with what we'll be covering today. So the plan is to take you through 4 key areas, and we'll be starting with overall brand purpose and thinking about people and planet. We'll be talking about purpose post-COVID and what are the attributes that everybody should be aware of. Who's connecting the dots to win? So we've got some case studies here of some brands that are doing really well at driving purpose throughout the brand. And then we'll finish with the indie uprise. So this is the small, fastest growing brands and kind of what they're doing to differentiate themselves in the market. Okay, so consumers care about brands who support causes that matter to them, being good for people and the planet. And the research is showing us that over 74% of US millennials said that they're more likely to buy brands supporting social issues that they care about. So it's just highlighting here just how important it is that brands support and drive purpose within their brands, because it's what consumers are really looking for and putting their money behind it as well. In terms of the areas that you can start to segment purpose into, we've got good for people and good for planet. And good for people is more around inclusivity and also around empowering people or driving positivity or confidence. So that's more about good for people. But you also have good for planet, which can be ranging from reducing plastic. It could be around the rainforests, but it could also be around clean ingredients and basically driving natural products or sourcing natural products. And so those are the 2 areas that we see brands driving purpose. And when brands do really well, it's when they drive them both. So you have some brands that are leaning more on planet and maybe some more on people. And what we see is, we'll show some examples a bit later, but brands that are driving both is where it's really key.
And you know, what's interesting is there are so many different types of causes or missions that brands can support or that consumers are interested in, so that really the brands have a lot of opportunities to get into some different areas that kind of align with their target consumers.
Definitely, absolutely. So it's going to be about finding what is right for the brand, so that it has the right fit for that brand. And also, that's one of the challenges that we'll talk about later on, is also finding your niche, because there are lots of brands that are doing this now. So it's like finding what is going to be your purpose is going to be the challenge going forwards. Mm-hmm. So now, in terms of just digging into the planet section a little bit more, during COVID, one of the questions was whether planet and sustainability is really going to be important going forwards, because it was very important for consumers pre-COVID, and the question mark was around whether it was going to be important post-COVID. So first of all, the answer is yes, it's still going to be important. Over a third of consumers say that sustainability is important and will pay more. And then looking at what the top attributes are, we can actually see what are the main things or claims or attributes that brands will need to have or be expected to have, because that's what consumers are looking for. So it's very important for them, for example, that the product is using recycled packaging or looking for less packaging, all the way down to like organic farming, for example. So these are some of the top attributes that brands will need to have. What's really interesting as well, though, is when you add on whether they're prepared to pay a premium. So we look at whether they'd be prepared to pay a premium. If you look at recycled packaging or less packaging, so because I have less packaging, I'm actually not prepared to pay any more. So the consumers are just expecting that companies will be doing these initiatives and they won't be paying more. If you look at organic, then you've got a smaller percentage that say it's important, but you look at the difference on how many more are prepared to pay a premium. So when you're thinking about what your initiatives are going to be, taking into consideration whether actually consumers will just expect you or whether you'll be able to charge a premium for those initiatives.
So if there's some sort of sustainability claim on the packaging or, in the marketing, they know they're going to pay more, and they accept it, they expect it, and they're fine with it.
Exactly. So for certain, it varies. So exactly. So for organic farming, for example, if you're gonna have an organic product, it's more difficult in terms of the supply and scaling. So there's that side of it. However, consumers will pay more for it. But if you are to talk about your packaging, you're reducing the amount of packaging, so it's less packaging, you're going to struggle to get a premium for that product because consumers are just expecting that if I'm buying less packaging, I shouldn't be paying as much. Yeah. So just to be aware of that when you're looking at how you're going to claim, what claims you're going to make, or what route you're going to take.
Gotcha. And what was interesting is I've spoken with a lot of buyers over the past year at our programs, and during the height of the pandemic, right? Because like you said, sustainability has always been a growth area. It's always been a top of mind with consumers. But during the height of the pandemic, where there were a lot of out of stocks and people were scared, they're worried, sustainability kind of took a back seat to themselves. It's like, you know what, I'm going to take care of me first, survive this thing, and then I'll worry about the planet. But now that we're climbing out of it, now they're even more focused on wellness overall, wellness for themselves, but also for the planet. So I'm getting a sense that it might even be stronger coming out of the pandemic now.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. So now we can just dig into a few case studies or brands that are driving purpose really well, and sort of look at some of the initiatives that they're doing to drive it into their brand. And Dove is one example where they're doing it really, really well. So if you look on the framework of Good for People and Good for Planet, you can see that the initiatives that they have, this is just a small example, but they have many, many initiatives. But I've just picked a few key ones. So, for example, the Dove Real Beauty Pledge or Dove Self-Esteem Project. So it's about making beauty a positive experience, making it accessible and inclusive experience, and self-esteem. So working with younger people to give them a positive relationship with the way they look. So these are all about promoting positivity. And they're definitely very strong on that side. And as I say, it's just a few examples. Moving over to the planet side, you've got all these other initiatives as well. So reducing plastic. So they make huge commitments about reducing the amount of plastic that they're using, which is a big concern, especially for consumers in Europe. Then you've got cruelty-free. So again, we saw earlier that this is something that consumers are looking for and find important. And then you've got natural products as well. So they're also environmentally friendly. So this is not just a natural ingredient, but it's also that they're sourced sustainably is also important for consumers. And even recently have announced the reforestation project. So in Indonesia, where they're making commitments to replant trees in the Indonesian rainforest. So all these kind of really big initiatives are ticking lots of different boxes and attributes that people are looking for in a brand, and that consumers find really important.
And, I think this points out something that's critical is they're doing a lot of messaging around all these different things. You have to engage with your consumer base. You have to really let them know, tell your story about how you're doing these different things so that they're aware of it.
Definitely tell the story and live the story. So you're telling the story, but if you just say the story and you don't mean it, then consumers will find out, and that will create a backlash.
Yeah.
If you are going to talk about purpose, you have to live that purpose from end to end, because consumers are so much more aware now and so much more informed that they will research and they will find if you're not actually living up to your purpose on what you say. So that's also another key thing.
Yeah, so one way to accomplish that from a content standpoint is just simply document all of these things that you're doing and let that be the story. You document these, like here, Dove and the Rainforest Project, document what they're doing, document the results of it. or the Self-Esteem Project. I'm sure that, you know, you're documenting all of the people that are involved and what they're doing. So I think that's a big part of it. Like you said, it's key. You got to walk the talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and engage them. Bring people in. So, like you said, update people. Keep people want to know that you're actually living this, and they're interested in it. So, yeah, engage with them regularly. So another example, which is leading more on the good for planet side, is Garnier. So this example is really interesting because it just goes so far on the good for planet side. I thought it was really interesting that they have a manifesto where they have these 5 key points of their manifesto. So again, I've just picked a couple of these, but it's purposeful, and you can see the products that they're launching are aligned with that manifesto. So if we take the green sciences and formulas, where they were looking to have an average of 91% of biodegradability of their products, you can then see they've launched recently a natural product which is called hair food, and then 98% of the ingredients are natural, and you know, it almost looks like food. It's that natural. They've also got more renewable energy products, so reducing carbon emissions. They've got cruelty free, so they're all officially approved as cruelty free. You've also got the recycled and recyclable packaging, and so again, reducing the amount of plastic or packaging, reducing the amount of packaging that they use. And then you can see they've launched, there's a hair care product which is a shampoo bar as a format, so it uses hardly, I think it's zero plastic waste. So they're not just saying that they're doing these things, they're also backing them up with their innovations that they're launching. And that's another key point, is connecting the product to the purpose. So you're saying that you're doing all these things around recycled packaging, but you need to back that up with the product as well.
What's interesting is these two brands are both well-known international brands, so they're just really setting the expectations across the industry for all consumers and brands.
Definitely. So this is like something that they're setting the table stakes. So they're kind of saying these are the minimum that consumers are expecting now. So these big mass brands are hitting all of these attributes. And so again, they're sort of setting the playing field. So consumers are going to come to expect brands to be to have similar initiatives. So it's kind of like, these are the rules that you need to abide. If you're going to play in this market, then these are kind of the rules, and they're setting the table stakes. So the new brands are going to have to, you know, as a minimum, be looking to have these initiatives in their brand. And just moving on to the indie uprise. So these, again, quite a lot of what we've seen so far is the US focused and US data, and so is the indie uprise. But what we typically see is that what's happening in the US very often travels across to Europe, either not long after, or the trends are very, very similar, and it's a very comparable kind of market. So we talk about the indie uprise, and this is mainly focused on very small brands in the market, so we can see how much they contribute in the market. So 1.7% contribution. However, in terms of the recovery after the pandemic, it's indie brands that have recovered the most sales post-pandemic, and we'll talk about a little bit about the reasons why. But again, I think one of the reasons was that, as you were mentioning, during the pandemic, people were just panic buying. But on top of that, they were also looking for, choosing brands that they were familiar with. So they were panic buying, but in potentially a small way, they were choosing these brands that they were familiar with, that were reliable, that they knew. And so I think indie brands, the smaller brands, kind of suffered a little bit through that as well, because they also would have had a slightly or not as good supply chain as some of these bigger manufacturers. So restocking the shelves would have been more challenging for some of these smaller brands. So I think that was to play as well, but they're definitely recovering quicker than the rest of the industry. And there's a few examples here of some of the brands that are considered indie that are driving growth. So Raw Sugar is one brand, and I think they started with a deodorant, but they also have lots of other different personal care categories now in their portfolio. But it's clean ingredients, it's organic, it's no plastics, it's all of these kind of attributes that we just talked about. And you can see these brands that are growing, just as a reference.
I think one thing that also happened during the pandemic is because of the out of stocks that happened with some of the major brands, it actually forced trial of some of these new independent brands. So, in other words, the retailers were just scrambling to get product on the shelf, and there was an opportunity for some of these new brands to get in there. And if they were good enough, well, the consumers might have switched over to them. By the same token, if they were horrible, then I've had the experience once. At one point, I went to my local drugstore and I was looking for paper towels, and the regular brands were not there. There were all these brands that I did not see ever before, and so I was happy for that. It's great. It was a great opportunity for them to get in front of consumers that they never would have had before. The only thing is the product was so horrible, it actually pushed like a spill around the table instead of soaking it up, and so that was like, you know, not a good thing for that brand. But let's say that brand was great.
You
Well,
tried it.
then I might
Mhm.
have switched to it or wanted to keep getting it. So there were some opportunities that happened in that way.
Very true. Very true. So now just looking at a couple of the different areas where these indie brands are really, I'd say, leading the way or driving the way across these different areas. And what differentiates them is, first of all, they're trend makers. And I'd say they lead the way in this. So, for example, a lot of the indie brands, they're organic, clean ingredients. And this is more of the, I suppose, planet area. So focusing on the natural ingredients and sustainably sourced ingredients as well. And the other thing that you notice is that it's not just, for example, if there's a mass brand, they might have an organic range, but these brands are entirely organic. So that is a kind of a difference, because it's like we're all organic, which is more challenging, I think, for a mass brand to be entirely organic, but it's just showing that they are all built around these individual purposes. So the whole range is organic. In terms of being authentic as well. So we had a conversation around social media influencers on various different categories that we're seeing now. So that I think people are moving away from celebrities and moving towards these social media influencers who, are less likely to be, sponsored by particular people, by other brands. That, they're meant to be more authentic and reliable in terms of their recommendations and their opinions.
And those two, the trend makers and the authentic, right? I think social media has played such a much larger role during the pandemic because, one, people were home a lot more. They were just, consuming all of this information online. They were going to social media, following these micro influencers that you were talking about. All these new influencers came up, and because of that, one, they're so much more focused on ingredients. They know so much more about ingredients. Last 2 weeks ago, or was it last week? Last week, we recently had our skin bath, cosmetics, and fragrance program, and most of the buyers I spoke with, they all said that consumers know so much more about the ingredients than they ever did before, and that social media, some of these indie brands were really crushing it on social media, particularly TikTok. And like that combination is really making a more educated consumer. But you're right, that trust has got to be there with that influencer. If they don't trust that influencer, they're not going to listen.
Definitely. And then there's just two other areas which are, I think, around innovation, which we see the innovation cycle, which is extremely quick. We know that global manufacturers are definitely focusing on shortening their innovation cycle. So this is also about reacting to trends. So like you just mentioned, it's about having your finger on the pulse in terms of the right ingredients, what's trending, and they're able to turn these products around very, very quick to meet that need, because now with social media, things are changing so much more rapidly. So things are trending, and brands and companies need to react to those a lot quicker. So they are able to innovate in a much quicker way to these kind of trends. And in terms of values as well, this is more focused on the people side of things. So again, it's around not just having it as a part of the brand. It's leading the way in terms of being the first to really promote these causes. So then it's similar to organic. It's like, it's not just something that you put on the pack and you have a range somewhere. The brand is built based on on that purpose or that mission, and they really show that throughout the entire brand. So values first again is people. So you've got the kind of blend of the product, the people side of things, good for people, and you've got good for planet. And then in between that, you've got the more kind of practical things around communication, social media, and innovation as well, all built in. And these are the things that are really driving the growth and recovery of indie brands.
Yep, and that's why we're seeing a lot of larger brands acquire a lot of these indie brands. This way they could get all of that quickly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's some to watch out, and some of those ones I think that were driving the growth, I think, yeah, they're definitely on probably on a hot list. So yeah, ones to watch. Just finishing then with the key takeaways. Based on what we've discussed today, there's kind of three major things that brands can look to do to drive growth with purpose. And the first one is to embed both the good for people and good for the planet into the brand. So we've looked at the causes around worthy causes. We've looked at also being positive, body positivity, beauty positivity, and inclusivity, and also around the planet. So that's driving the natural ingredients and also sourcing sustainably, reducing plastics. And this has to be communicated throughout the brand. So again, we were just saying it's not about just putting a label on. You've got to live it throughout the brand for consumers to really believe in your brand. The second key one here is that for other brands to know, it's like, if these mass brands are setting the table stakes where they're ticking all of these attribute boxes, so reducing plastic, naturals, cruelty-free, sustainable, driving these huge manifestos, indie brands or other brands will need to start incorporating these into their own brand, and also on top find a way to differentiate, because this is going to become the norm and consumers are going to just expect to see these attributes baked into the brand. So the challenge is to make sure you have these, and then the next step is also to make sure that you're looking for that niche, or you have your own purpose as well to really drive growth. And then finally, it's about, we've seen the power of social media and how these social media influencers can have such a huge impact on consumer behavior, and their recommendations are really, really powerful in terms of getting consumers to understand and actually to be authentic in your messaging. And that's really key thing that the indie brand should look to do.
Excellent. Great insights, Joe. And just to let everybody know that there are some Nielsen representatives who will be having meetings with brands during this session. So feel free to, pick their brains about how their data and services can to help you in your journey. So, Joe, again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks so much, Joe.
Okay.